Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about virtual production and media production. And our second hour today, we usually like to spend a little more time on something every second hour. And our second hour today is going to be talking about audio troubleshooting. What are the tools that we use to do that? How do we fix it ahead of time? How do we fix it afterwards? So audio troubleshooting, we'll be answering your questions about that in the second hour. This is a good day to ask audio questions. It's our audio day. We've got a couple special guests that usually just show up on Tuesday, Carl and Mickey, as well as the regulars. And so it's a great day to ask your audio questions. We've got a handful of questions in here, plenty of room for more if you'd like to ask them. If you ask them a little earlier before the show or at the beginning of the show, it gives us a little more time to think about them than right at the end. So go ahead and throw those in right now. And let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Mitch, what do we got?
Thank you, Alex. First in from John Snyder in Reno, Nevada. He asked, Rogue Amoeba is having a 20% off sale. Is the upgrade to Audio Hijack 4 worth the price? What's your favorite feature?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth the price. My favorite feature is the fact that you can set it so that it does not automatically magnetize connections between blocks, which has been
It drives me crazy.
Headache, like when you're creating more complex processing chains.
Yeah, I never really understood it. I think just to your point, just for that one feature, it's worth upgrading. That was a huge shift. Next question.
Next in from John Nichols in Concord, California. John says, I'm missing something. I have an XLR mic going to a Mix Pre 6.2. I tried a USB-C to USB-C connection into my MacBook, but I don't see it as an audio interface. Is there any way to connect?
Go ahead, Courtney.
It should work. You might change your USB-C cable, because I've found a lot of USB-C cables out there that don't carry the data correctly, or they don't handshake correctly for an audio connection. So try a different USB-C cable, maybe one that is certified by Sound Devices to be a working version.
Mickey?
And definitely, as Courtney mentioned, try a different USB-C cable. And also look at your system information page. If you click on the Apple icon and hold down Option, you'll be able to open up a window that's called System Information, and it will show you all your hardware devices. If you see it in the USB list, that means it is being recognized by the computer as a USB device that is connected. If it doesn't show up there, then it may be the cable or something at fault with the Mix Pre itself.
Now go ahead, Peter.
So follow on to that point. One question is he using the USB-C to power it? Because if he's using, what I've discovered is if I actually plug it into external power, the USB-C connection has to be the right cable, back to what Mickey said. But if he's not powering it through the USB, if he is powering it through the USB, he's got a valid connection to the computer. He may not have the right cable.
Yeah, I think your problem is probably your cable. Let's go to the next question.
From John Wallace in Pontiac, Michigan. Mitchell, your audio sounds much better today. What has changed?
What happened, Mitchell?
Well, assuming that it sounds better, Mickey talked me into bypassing the AFX channel last night, and I said, look, just for you, Mickey, I will do the entire show tomorrow with it off. And if the group decides that they like it better this way, that's the way it's going to be.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I do like it better. He just turns down the annoying frequencies a little bit, and it makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, I think it sounds good. Next question.
All right, that was shorter than I thought it would be. Douglas Carmichael here with a question. For most audio workflows, do you think we will see a performance increase from the M2 versus the M1 Max?
Go ahead, Peter.
From an audio perspective, I doubt it would be perceptible. I mean, it's probably measurable, but not perceptible, because you're not stressing the M1 or the M2 to process audio in any way, shape, or form these days.
Yeah, I think that I definitely think we're going to see some performance. I think you're right. And there could be some longer rendering operations that you could see go a lot faster. I don't think it would change much while you're working in it. And as far as your workflow goes, Mickey may correct me on that. But I think that when you're bouncing tracks, you may see performance change of how fast it exports. Next question.
And it's coming in from me. My question is, how do you slate your broadcast productions?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
And basically, there's a lot of different ways to do it, but one example is this from yangaroo.com. Yangaroo.com, that's it. And basically, for an NTSC program, could be a music video, could be a spot. If they put it up, we can show you some of the particulars that they wanted it. But basically, they want a slate, then 5 seconds of black, and then the countdown slate or the actual video to start. And I'll bring up the actual graphic there. I think I have it here somewhere. Where did it go? There it goes. Oh, that's not it.
No.
Sorry, I don't have it. I thought it would come up on the screen there, but
Go ahead, Bill.
did not.
Yeah, I actually haven't done a slate in about 4 years now, and that's because all of my deliverables, they say they want first frame to last frame with nothing else. Slates go on the deliverable file generally, so it's part of the metadata that goes with the file out. But almost every spot I deliver to broadcast or to the web these days, they want nothing except the content because it's going to go in some automated playout system, and they don't want any mistakes made with slates running.
All right, go ahead, Mickey.
Pretty much whatever is on the delivery spec sheet.
Yeah, there you go. Courtney?
Yeah, I used to do tons and tons of screen photography and capture back in the early days for Microsoft and Apple and the others. And so I created my own slate program because we would be shooting sometimes within the bezel of the screen. So I have this slate that I can resize. And of course, you can change all the scene and take numbers and pop up color bars and everything else. So that came in quite handy. You could even click the sticks together and it gives you a sync mark.
That's great. That's great. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I just put the screenshot up there of the Yangaroo slate that they suggest. And as you can see, things have gotten a lot more complicated than the old standard def days of NTSC. This is the NTSC slate that they recommend if you're sending out a spot or a music video. And as you can see, there's lots of choices now because you've got codecs, bit rates, frame rates, drop frame, etc. All of those things are on there. I can post this if anybody's interested in seeing it. But this is the kind of information that most broadcast houses are going to want to see on the slate. Or you could use the great program from Jonas Datel. That's I guess it's the Info B or the File B. I think it's File B, which will report most of the specifications anyhow, in case you don't remember.
Interesting. Yeah. Our slates have been generally different. The ones that I've used in the past, where you have basically, we just want to make sure that we know the importance of a slate. A lot of times when we're delivering, and Bill's right that a lot of folks just don't want anything because they're going to put it into a playback. But when we're delivering files, oftentimes, and there's going to be a lot of different versions or files, having something at the very beginning that tells you which version this is to make sure you're not jumping into the wrong one is pretty useful. And we've usually taken the opportunity to do design work on it. In the ones that we've done in the past, I know with Pixel Core, we had to deliver lots of things all the time with these. And we spent some time on it to make sure that it was, it looked good. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I was just going to say, I've a little tool called Media Info does similar. I'm going to actually check out Jonas's because it may be more full featured, but it's just a little tiny init that sits on top of your desktop. I don't know if it's a init or some little micro app, but you throw a file on it. It tells you almost everything about how it was created. And I assume that most stations now are going to use those.
Yeah. And the slate, there's two different slates. One is something we put in as a graphic, and the other one is what kind of on the way to what Courtney said, which is slating your shots. So every shot, usually when you're doing post, you have a slate. Now, I generally prefer to have a slate with time code. So if we're able to jam our audio and video, for our cameras, we want the time code that we're using to be in the slate. One of the reasons for that is that if you have that time code jammed to the audio, you can, for some reason the cameras didn't pick up the time code, you can type it in later. You can say, I'm on this frame, and type that time code in and correct the time code inside of Final Cut or Resolve or whatever, and reset that time code so that it now lines up with your audio. So that's a pretty useful bit of tool. And of course, it tells you everything or most of what you need from that individual shot. One of the things that we did with Pixel Core, we had to do thousands of these, and there were so many, and it was a big system. One of the things that happens when you start having to do lots and lots of it in a given day is that you start to build up a system in which it works so that it can be mass produced, because we were doing it every day all the time. So one of the things we did with slates is that we'd say, slate in, someone put the slate in, we would not mark it until we told them to. We'd say mark it, and they'd close it, and then we'd say pull slate, and they'd turn it 90 degrees and pull it out. And the reason, and when we started it, we always started with this, we'd go slate in, and with it opened, we'd start rolling the camera to make sure that the slate is on the first frame. That way, when you open up all of your files, you just see all the names of all the things that are there. It greatly reduces how much time you spend looking for things. So you roll camera with the slate open, full frame or close to it. Then you close the slate and you hold it. And the reason we did this so mechanically was to keep people from doing this. So what they do is we'd have them hold it and we'd have them close it. And we wanted them to close it and hold and wait. And the reason we did that was so that people didn't give us a motion blurred slate in. So if we needed to actually use that audio, we could actually see when it closed, as opposed to what happens when people get lazy. So we would hit it. And then that's also why when they waited and then they had to turn it 90 degrees and pull out. It was just an extra action that meant that they were going the other direction, which kept them from flowing through it. And so that was when we were doing lots and lots of shows. That was something that we found to be a useful behavior. It's not, you don't see that on film very often. Lucky, it always just feels like they just kind of whack and then walk off. But we found that more mechanical procedure made it a lot easier to use it in the past in post. And again, we were actually doing so many of them. We just really needed it to be exact when we were there, and it looked nice too. Like it just looked more managed than what we normally see. All right, next question.
Kenneth Jones from Seattle, Washington, sometimes on the panel. Friend of Office Hours, Michael Forrest, has reduced today the lifetime cost of Shoot Pro webcam from $349 to US $99. Good on you, Michael. Is this the best deal for iPhone video now?
It's a good deal. I think that it was a great deal for a lot of us that jumped in last Friday, because it was even less than that. But I think that at $99 and just to know that if you get the Pro version that's not $99, I believe, talking to Michael, that you're just stuck with the feature set that you have there, but it's not going to expire. So it's not like you have a 1 year and then it expires after a year. It just means you don't get any updates. When you pay $99, it means you're going to get updates forever, as you go through it. So it isn't one of those things that he's going to take away from you. You'll have all the features that you see right now, even at the 1 year, which I think in the $30 range or whatever. I think that the big thing is that as an all-purpose as an all-purpose app, it's just really, really useful, because it really takes full advantage of, all of the different things that he's working on, all the different things that the camera can do and the phone can do. And so, and I think it's the only one like it right now. So there's a lot of other ones that are more specialized. Next question.
Eric Billings from Washington, D.C. is in with a question. Can the panel describe instances where high-impedance headphones greater than 300 ohms have made a difference in their work, or is that just a marketing gimmick? Thanks.
Go ahead, Carl.
It's not really a gimmick. High-impedance headphones were a necessity probably before the 90s. They were a utility tool for monitoring and recording studios, essentially. So we now know of headphone amplifiers. Like, you can get a good, RME headphone amplifier. They're all really good ones out there. Even some really high-end ones that'll cost you $10,000. But they didn't exist before the 90s. You won't be able to find one in the 80s or the 70s. They were tools that were used in recording studios just to monitor yourself. They weren't designed for high quality. They were designed, so the high impedance, what it could do is you could plug 6 or 7 headphones into one amplifier, essentially, and it was an amplifier. It was a speaker amplifier that simply just had resistors on it to actually bring the impedance way up, but bring the power down so it wouldn't blow up the headphones. So essentially, it was just a speaker output that had some electronics on it. It wasn't a specialized headphone amplifier. Then in the 90s, we started to get digital electronics. Digital electronics allowed us to actually have headphone amplifiers. And then with the iPod was the one that did it all, actually. So in 2001, the iPod came out, battery powered, with a very low impedance output. It was about 1 ohm, 2 ohms. And so what headphone manufacturers rushed to make headphones that work with that. And so, the Sonys that everyone likes to use here, Sennheisers, around 3264 ohms. Even like the AB 1266s, they're 50 ohms and they're $10,000. So pretty much the high end, low end from $100 to $10,000, they're all around between 32 and maybe 100 ohms. You do have high impedance headphones still made by a couple of manufacturers, but they're designed to work with some very bespoke headphone amplifiers and some legacy equipment. Pretty much everyone's in the 200 or below impedance, and nearly all the Sennheisers and that are now 32 to 64. So that's generally the range.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
There are lots of different headphones out there, and lots of different impedances, and lots of different amplifiers to drive them, everything up to those high voltage amplifiers. And I just want to point out something a little off subject, is that you use different types of headphones for different things. Like I got a pair of Sony 7506, I guess is what they are, listening to myself, because when I'm doing voiceover work, I want to hear myself at a different quality than I think it would if I were critically listening to music. And it might be altered. It might be a little peaky, but it works well, giving me feedback on my voice. A critical listening music headphones, like Carl was alluding to, could cost you a huge amount of money. We used to buy electrostatic headphones back in the day. They were great. So different headphones, different applications.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, the high impedance headphones were good for bridging line outputs, so that you could use it to monitor a line output on a piece of audio gear, and it wouldn't load down the output very much. So they were useful in the recording studio, as Carl said, for adding multiple headphones to a single line output without adding too much amplification to it.
Next question.
Johnny Estillas from Manila has the question, just out of curiosity, whatever happened with office hours on Clubhouse? Is Clubhouse dead as far as the panel is concerned?
We tried it for a while, and so we were doing it. We had to figure out a way to get proper audio into it, which was instead of using your phone, which is a lot of these folks try to keep everybody on the same page, everybody on the same level, so they don't allow you to use things outside your phone to try to make sure that some people like us don't manipulate it. But we figured out how to manipulate that anyway by using the Bluetooth, the Audinate to Bluetooth. So we were able to get regular mics into it, and so we did some experimentation with it. I think that fundamentally, the way that they did their viral process, of wanting to have access to your whole contact list was really gross and gooey. And I think even though we did it for a little while, it really bothered us to be in a program that's doing that to everyone. I also think that one of the issues was really that the way to manage a conversation, we were so used to it, we basically were just end up using Mukana on the outside of it so that we could actually make sense of it. Because as without Mukana, Clubhouse is just a dumpster fire. And so anytime I went to anything other than our show, all I could hear was long pauses, people talking over each other, people like all these things that just make the conversation to me just completely unlistenable. And so I just didn't feel like there was going to be any legs in what they were doing. Go ahead, Carl.
Just quickly, with a show of hands, can any panelists just say if they've used Clubhouse in the last 3 months?
Nobody I know is using Clubhouse in the last 3 months. Again, I think that their fundamental flaw was really that the management of the conversation was so painful that it just didn't make it worth doing, and I think that's we really they didn't get that right, and they grew too fast and they didn't make that correction, and I don't think they understood it. I think that's the bottom line, is they didn't have enough of these conversations. They didn't build an infrastructure that made it a smooth conversation, and then it became it's just really hard to listen to. And then the other thing is, part of the secret to office hours is that we are sprinkled with both experts and radio people. So we have some and people who are used to production. That's the advantage. Most other verticals could not start what office hours is because they don't know what shows are supposed to look like. So whether it's people who have a lot of expertise, people who have broadcast experience, people who have a little bit of both, that changes it. When you have just average folks off the street starting to create their own shows, they often are technically, logistically and format wise, just really challenged, and it's just hard to listen to. Go ahead, Bill, real quick.
Yeah, that's exactly what I experienced when I went over there. That and the Facebook is doing some things where they're trying to do community live stuff. And every time I listen to one of those where all comers can just open up their microphone and talk, it breaks down. And I think the rules Alex set down for us in this community early really helped curate it and make it into what it is today.
Well, I think beyond the rules, just a lot of people who are already understand shows, broadcast, technical things. It allowed us to grow in a way that now we could grow from where we are. We can grow to other verticals, but it would be very hard for other verticals to get to where we are. So it's a different, kind of process. Go ahead, Hashid.
As far as the platform, it kind of corners you to be in one little circle. And I've known accessibility companies use it for their marketing, so to speak, but I think it doesn't let you organically involve yourself with the community. So way the office hours has given you an organic aspect of coming to a group, using Discord, using Zoom, different tools, we get to have a longer conversation. Whereas to me, Clubhouse at first was on iOS only. Then they said, okay, we'll bring it to Android, but they still had so many friction standards that it just didn't help the situation. And I don't want to join a community that is going to have that much friction.
Next question.
From Colin Mulcahy in Dublin, Ireland. Zoom ISO. Anyone having any challenges with version 2.0.2?
2.0.2 just came out, I believe, yesterday. So it just dropped yesterday. So it's pretty brand new. It makes some improvements for, especially for you in HDMI workflows and some of the advanced audio workflows. So it's out. We should jump on it and let the Zoom team know if there are anything that needs to be changed. But it's, I think that we have the opportunity as a group to be a pretty important piece of moving it forward. So I highly recommend downloading it and playing with it and giving feedback, because right now is one of the most important times for Zoom ISO, and it is inextricably connected to our success, both as office hours and individually as we look at events. There's just nothing else like it, and no one else is going to do it. No one else is going to catch up to this. And so we want to take it on. We should be taking it on within our group to really make sure that it's rock solid and it has the feature sets that we need, because it's our best chance to create some pretty great online events. Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael. What does everyone think of the Roland Juno X synthesizer? Do you think it's a way to capitalize on nostalgia, or is it bringing the Juno design into the modern era?
Carl?
So I own the big sibling to the Juno X. I own the Jupiter X. So the Jupiter X came out probably a year before the Juno X. So essentially what it is, it's a modern design aesthetic towards a nod towards the 80s, towards those synthesizers. And it does have a recreation of the actual synthesizers from the 80s in what's called digital modeling. So essentially, this is analog behavior modeling, ABM. Essentially, what's happening is you can get the exact same sounds and you can age the synthesizer, but the actual where these musical tools are very valuable compared to their 40-year-old brethrens, is that they're far more user-friendly, they're far more in tune, for one, but they're also far more capable. These are modern tools that can do a lot, like probably orders of magnitude more than what the vintage ones can do. If you want vintage synths, then you want a musical instrument that is very limited, but it's more an aesthetic thing, a museum piece, or breaking rights. That's about it. That's about all you get with the vintage synths. You don't get a better sound quality than a modern synth. Modern synths are just far more better.
Next question.
Chris Widener from Lafayette, Indiana. Chris asks, with the recent ruling on AI copyright, how does this affect your thinking on AI tools for production?
And as a note, before we jump into the answer, we are burning through these questions. If we run, we have about 3 left. If we get to the bottom of those, we'll just start the next hour earlier than expected. So just note that we're cutting through them fast. Go ahead, Courtney.
I wasn't aware of a recent court decision concerning copyright, or at least any changes in the copyright law. Maybe someone is suing an AI over misuse of their copyrighted material if their copyrighted material was used as a source for training the AI. Under the U.S. copyright law, it says images are technically not subject to copyright protection generated by AI because only original works of authorship are considered. And to qualify as a work of authorship, a work must be created by a human being, according to the U.S. copyright law. So you may not be able to copyright the images generated by an AI. Whether somebody can challenge that as to be derivative from a copyrighted material, that's probably what's playing out in the court. Maybe somebody else can enlighten me as to what this court case he's speaking of is.
Go ahead, Carl.
So what these laws will require is precedence, and precedence was just set a few days ago with James Earl Jones. So he's just signed over to Lucasfilm his likeness of his voice to be used as Vader. So he is no longer going to be doing Vader. The last 2 times Vader has appeared in Lucasfilm property has been AI, and he is happy with that. So he's happy to sign off himself to say you can use the AI version of my voice now, and he'll retire and probably get a nice little pension from it.
Yeah, and I think that what's interesting is that I think Lucasfilm decided to take, and Disney decided to take kind of the high ground on that. I don't know if they necessarily had to do that, of having that there, but I think that it's definitely the right way to do it. And so they, and I think that you're absolutely right that they are setting precedent, and kind of setting what the ground rules are going to be. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I read that story, Carl, and it's fascinating how that all worked. And I think it made some additional comments that over at Lucasfilms that James Earl Jones is considered the godfather of the Star Wars program. They would share with him the character arc and some other things. So he may have a tighter emotional connection with the series than just as a voice actor.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
This is going to be an interesting thing for me because there's 2 aspects of it that I think are in conflict. The existing copyright system is there to protect creators, and that's a good function, and I hope it continues to go. But you get this circumstance where, like, if you say to one of these AI tools, I'm a trumpeter, give me a logo, and it comes up with a logo, and you say, I like that, or I like most of it, I can adapt it into something, and you end up using that as your logo for your company or whatever. Will there ever become a time where somebody realizes that you did that and then they say you don't own this copyright because it was an artificially created thing? And if your ownership of that branding element gets called into question because it was not created in the traditional way, how are these rules going to affect that? I mean, you can imagine the brand equity that Pepsi has or McDonald's. And if somebody were to be able to claim that for the next generation product like that, that they don't hold copyright, it's a mess.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I agree with Alex. I think Disney is just taking a precaution that it's a lot cheaper for them to pay off James Earl Jones than to try and deal with some type of lawsuit, that especially a lawsuit over something that's never been proven in court before, because that could last decades in the courts and would cost them a lot more money than paying off James Earl Jones. So, but once it becomes a standard practice of paying actors to use their representation in artificially AI-generated works, then it may be able to be incorporated into the next copyright law as it's written. But currently, I don't think it's protected.
I mean, I think one of the complexities right now with AI is that, you have artists as well. This is one of the things that it's not a ruling, but a fight that has begun over, artists saying, well, if you say something's in my style, or you say or you submitted one of my images as a guide to something like Stable Diffusion, do I own the output that comes out of that piece? And so that's something that is a pretty complex issue that's related. That I think that it's going to, so can AI generate content that you could say, and again, I think that if you create something, I've been playing a lot with AI, and it isn't just putting in a text; it's putting in text and guiding it and working with it. Much like I really think of it as an image synthesizer. It has things like you're putting things in and you're turning knobs and you're moving things around, and we're going to have more and more manual control over it. And at that point, it starts to become more of a thing. It's a lot of people use things in the real world to generate something. You might use throwing paint at things and having the reaction, or doing, dropping something, and that's the art, And so I think that the fact that someone isn't mechanically putting every pixel in place is probably we've definitely, a lot of people use filters and lots of other things. And so it's going to be really interesting to see where that goes. If they really decide that it can't be copyrighted, what's interesting is I think that it actually will have the inverse effect on art, because suddenly art is everywhere and it's not, and nothing's copyrighted and nothing is, and people will, it'll actually make it harder to sell the art if there's no copyright, because suddenly people will be using it a lot and there'll be no way to slow it down. And so it's actually, it'll be an interesting puzzle. Next question.
Next question from Colin Mulcahy in Dublin, Ireland. Zoom ISO version 2 with Pro license added. I have a Decklink 8K Pro connected to Mac. How do I set up embedded audio for each participant to have SDI out with video into ATEM?
So I have to admit that most of the time that I've done this, I've been using Dante. So I've been applying those to Dante outputs or to loopback outputs, and I haven't put them into the embedded. You should be able to select that inside of the audio outputs to the SDI and to attach it there. But I'll be honest, I'm not 100% sure, because almost all my testing has been related to it. I know that when we did NDI, it just comes with it. And I believe that it comes with it there. So I apologize that we're not more accurate there, but almost all of my testing, because I don't really use the ATEM for audio, has been mostly focused on both embedded from NDI, as well as which kind of comes for free, as well as going out to either loopback or Dante, which I would recommend. is how you want to produce that. But I have all the pieces. I have the boxes and the ATEM, and we just have 2 live shows today and tomorrow, and then after that I get to actually plug them in. I had to have cables sent. I was out of cables. I did find some very nice cables. I will say that these ones are nice, and they have the proper SDI on the end, to work with. So we'll be testing more of those in the future. And Bill, I have a 911, so I apologize. I thought it'd be longer, but I have to go deal with something. Can you keep running with this?
Yeah.
And for everyone watching, please keep throwing those questions in. Make sure that everybody's got taken care of. I got to jump to a live show that needs my attention. So all right, I'll see you guys in a little bit.
Fair enough. And I believe, let's see, are we on Colin McKay's question here? And if so,
we just finished it.
Or Mitch has a comment. That's why I just wanted to check and see. So Mitch, go ahead.
Actually, Chad Lafarge does. He said Zoom ISO audio does not embed with SDI.
Oh, okay. So there's some useful information. Then let's go on to the next question, Mitch.
Morgan Price from Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. OBS 28 is having problems with outputting key fill properly on the Ultra Studio Decklink output. I've rolled back to 27. Anyone having similar problems and any fixes?
Anybody working here with OBS 28? I know a lot of people use that software, but I don't know anybody, and I'm not seeing any hands on our panel. So you may have asked a question where nobody has specific expertise today. If that is the case, wait a second. John Preto just popped in. John, you have some thoughts?
Keenan and I and Chris are all on 28, and we're having not that specific issue, but we're having issues, especially with Zoom. There seems to be some fighting between OBS and Zoom. And so we've all downgraded to version 27.
Okay, so there's some obvious code issues here in the first ones that they're probably going to get to and fix over the course of time. This is one of the issues you run into when you're an early adopter of a new technology, particularly in this era where everybody's computer is so different. We all have so many back-end routines running that something that is fine on computer A runs into some conflict in the code in computer B and makes it difficult. So I guess the advice here is to stay tuned. If OBS has been around for a long time, I'm sure they'll work out their bugs and figure it all out over time. Might be a good time to put in a bug report if you're having this problem so that they know what's happening with their software. Let's go on to the next question.
Jeff Cohen from Miami Beach, Florida asks, anyone have any thoughts or additional info on the Adobe Project Shasta audio tool?
And Courtney.
I haven't used it, and I've looked at I think what it does is it's a voice to text conversion, like transcription. So it'll look at the audio track of your video files and generate metadata of the words spoken in that audio track. And then I guess you can use those either as transcription, or you could use them that metadata as part of assembling a rough cut. I'm thinking that's what they're using it for. Now that has been done in the past. There have been several editing packages that offer the ability to assemble a rough cut based on the script. You input your script, and if you have transcription entered for or subtitles entered for each clip, closed caption information in each clip. It can assemble the clips onto a timeline for you based on the script and your multiple choices. If you have multiple takes or multiple coverage, all on the timeline based on when a word starts within a particular clip. I'm guessing that's what it's going to be used for, although I haven't used it.
It's interesting. My old friends Phil and Greg at Intelligent Assistants have a similar product they've had out for some years now called Builder that allows you to edit via text. So it also uses transcription services in the cloud. When you get the transcript back, you edit the transcripts, and that links back directly to the video clips that you originally imported and transcribed, and you can cut a thing automatically. Now, it sounds like Adobe with their resources is using a similar kind of thing, but it has extended it far beyond what Phil and Greg did with that original product. But it'd be interesting. I'm actually in a circumstance right now where I have the Final Cut things that I'm doing on Friday, and I've got a lot of content, and I want to look at it in a different way in terms of cut down and editing. So I was actually thinking of using Builder, their product, to go through and do that and see if that workflow is different for me. I'm unfortunately not an Adobe subscriber or anything, and I don't carry any of those, so I can't use this. But it sounds like it's interesting. And we're seeing these kind of AI tools go into a lot of things. So be interesting. Keep us up to date about what's going on. Let's move to the next question.
Josh Kaufman is here from Pittsburgh, PA. Josh asks, what are your favorite tools or methods to manage crew and talent scheduling in multiple time zones? What unique time zone related challenges have you overcome, like regional transition times and offsets, etc.?
And our friend Josh, who is in our back end system and does a lot of scheduling of us, and I can see the amount of work he's doing. It is prodigious. I imagine he's looking at that. So far, nobody has popped in here with a suggestion for that. Mickey's going to try to help us out. Mickey?
Yeah, I usually get to be the one who schedules meetings and such, but if I do, I end up using timeanddate.com's time zone converter. You can add multiple time zones in a list there, and you can drag around a slider, and it will show you good or bad times to have a meeting between all those time zones that you have on that list.
Courtney.
I haven't tried it, but doesn't Google Calendar offer a feature like this? So if you have multiple people linked to a common calendar and you schedule a meeting at a certain time and you schedule it in your time zone, I think it has a function where it will convert it to the local time zone of anyone who is subscribed to that calendar.
Yeah, I think I've been experiencing that because we get a lot of things here on the show. And I know people are working on this. We've had people touching this process from literally all around the world. And everything that has come to me, no matter where somebody originates the message, seems to be converted to my time zone, which makes things a lot easier. Peter Sargent has thoughts too.
Well, I was going to say, most of the modern calendaring systems will automatically adjust for your local time zone when you receive the meeting notice. But what Mickey was talking about is something I also do many times because I haven't dealt with anybody in the Philippines yet. I've dealt with people in Okinawa, though. Mickey is trying at doing somebody in Okinawa, somebody in the U.S., and somebody in Germany is trying to find when to schedule the meeting is more the problem. Because and frankly, that's the worst case scenario I can think of right now is that spread of time zones. But I have to figure out when is a good time. And of course, coming up here soon for Carl, we're going to, the US is going to be thoroughly offset again because North America changes differently than everywhere else in the world. So
Mickey, and I'm only laughing because I used to live in Arizona and the time change used to completely bamboozle me. Mickey, go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. Finding the time to schedule things is the hardest part across multiple time zones. Inevitably, you would end up with one or two time zones being at a not a comfortable hour to be working, and usually you have to bow to making it a pleasant, humane hour for the client. Usually.
And it's no small task. I think people have seen my wide shot. I don't have my camera on today over there, but I actually have 3 clocks on the wall to the right of me, one on San Diego time, one on London, and one on Beijing. For a while, my wife was teaching English as a second language classes in Beijing, so she had to keep track of their schedule. And I was working with a partner in London, and I had to keep track of when they were there. And it's just difficult. And you get folks like Carl, who's in Australia, and that's way on the other side of the time zone thing for me. So I had to pay attention when I was dealing with another fellow I was working with who was in, I think, New Zealand, that I wanted to make sure I wasn't calling him at 3 o'clock in the morning. And so I always had to be aware of that at least. Pete, you had something to say?
I was just going to say, I mean, years ago, I was having to manage a team where part of the team was in Portsmouth, UK, and part of the team was actually in Perth, Carl. And invariably, one of us was eating breakfast and one of us was having wine for dinner at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And then what you don't want to do is think, oh, it's the middle of my morning, I'll just call, and realize that it's 4:15 in the morning.
You can't do that.
I think that covers that. Josh, we understand your challenges. This is a difficult thing in this modern era where you can work globally, but people live in different realities based on where the sun is relative to them. Let's move on to the next question.
And it's from Peter Belbin, deep in the heart of Texas in Houston. Might be good to explain 0 dB full scale versus 0 dB VU and what that means for signal chains, how much headroom is recommended for both measurement metering systems.
All right, we're going to start with Carl, go through Mitch, and then Mickey. So Carl, take it away.
Keep it simple. Full scale is just the scale where 0 dB would be you're hitting a square wave in that system. So essentially that's where you're clipping in the hardware. It's not clipping digitally. You could be clipping an analog, but you're just clipping in that hardware. So full scale would be clipping in that hardware some way. Essentially you're turning all your sound waves going in are full square waves. Essentially a dB VU is a volume unit, and that's a relative unit. So it's just a unit of volume. So that's essentially what we call dB VU, and that's a relative scale as well. So full scale is a relative scale to the hardware generally. It can be in software as well. And then VU is just a volume unit, and it's probably one of the older known terms where that's how we measure volume is we use decibels from Bell Laboratories.
Mitchell Hill.
Yeah, that's correct. And the 0 dB, just to clarify that, in the full scale, there's nowhere else to go. That's it. Maximum clip, forget it. Nothing there. For the VU side, a VU unit is the root mean square, usually RMS. And at 0 dB on a VU, properly calibrated VU meter, you're putting out +4, actually, to be exact. If you're using the broadcast standards it was based on, AT&T and other people like that have used that as the standard for quite some time, usually associated with analog.
And Mickey.
Yeah, to build on what Mitch said, yeah, VU is can also be used to describe a meter ballistics as opposed to an actual scale. If you are metering VU within an analog system, most entities calibrate -20 dBFS to 0 VU, or vice versa, 0 VU to -20 dBFS. There are some, though, that do calibrate -20 dBFS to -18 dBFS to 0 VU. That gives just a little less headroom, but it depends on what standard the entities you're working with run on.
And Courtney.
And if you come from the old world of Nagra recorders, you'd have a modulometer, which read -8 dB was your peak that you were going for on a Nagra modulometer, which was an analog. It's kind of a peak meter, but it would read kind of peaks, and you had to be careful there because it was analog and you could saturate the tape. These days with 32-bit float, the full scale 0 dB doesn't really mean much anymore because it's probably impossible to max out the number of bits in a digital signal at 32-bit float. So you're safe there.
And just anecdotally, from somebody who came up in the analog era, we used to love a thing that used to happen when you exceeded 0 VU on VU meters and analog systems, because you get a kind of a soft clipping that made your voice punchy or something like that. So everybody who was trying to do like rock and roll or radio where you wanted to be loud, you were always working above the 0 VU thing, trying to get this perfect sound out of it. And then all of a sudden digital came in, and we realized that if you go literally one tiny increment over the max saturation, the sound doesn't just get nice, it gets horrible. And there is a sound of digital clipping that you really wanted to avoid because it was horrible. So I know I had to recalibrate my whole thinking when I made the transition from analog metering and analog signal change to digital. Too much is not a good thing. Mitch, you had a last thought?
Yeah, I like the fact that you took us back to the original radio days. And even in the old days, I think they were a little bit wise to what the DJs were doing exactly what you were just saying, Bill, because even at 0, even if that meter was pinned, there was probably still another 18 dB built into the equipment that allowed you to increase it. And as I've said before, the engineer used to come in and tap me in the shoulder because the meter was literally tapping so hard on maximum deflection that you could hear it going tick, 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 tick. So that'll give you an idea how loud it was.
Yeah, it just, every era, the young people, and we were all young back then, you try to work the system and get the best sound you can. And actually in radio, particularly in AM radio in the early days, if people were punching a car dashboard radio and something was louder and sounded better than something else, you tended to stay there. So there was actually an economic driver of trying to be the loudest folks on the block. Hopefully that's gone away because it can be annoying. Anyway, let's move on. We're too much nostalgia.
Samuel Nordvik from Norway. How would you digitize an old reel-to-reel tape? Have an old tape player that does not have standard connections.
Carl's going to help us out.
So essentially, whenever anyone ever asks me this, if they're going to do LP tape, so if they want highest quality, there's always just one I always just go to as far as the quality, and that's the RME. So this is pretty much, it stands alone. There's only one like it. It's not affected by chip shortage because this chip is so rare that RME have them all. So they've got them all sitting in a warehouse. So you can still buy this. As you can see by the specs, this is beyond the reach of nearly anything that's out there to record. Even the DSD, you can go up to 11 megahertz, which is DSD, 512, 256. So this is pretty much it. It's designed for audio files to record in analog and to convert it to digital. And then on the front, you have your balanced headphone amplifier. So 4-pole balanced headphone amplifier. And then you can also have balanced left and balanced right headphone amplifier. So you can have 2 wires going to 2 separate cans. So yeah, the RME.
Excellent advice. I will also say that if you have tapes, whatever you're going to put them on to play them out, just make sure that you've done all the maintenance. If you find an old tape recorder in the garage or something like that and decide to put that old analog tape in it to digitize it, the fact that the capstan and the pinch roller particularly, which is usually a soft rubber thing that actually moves the physical tape along, they can dry out and get hard, and you'll have a lot of instability in the signal coming out of that if you're going to digitize it. So just do your best to try to look up old analog recording capture, and you'll find a lot of articles written by people who are aware of all these issues and can walk you through cleaning the heads and getting everything as ready as you can to capture. Courtney, you had a thought?
And when you're digitizing an old analog reel-to-reel tape, the quality of your digitizer is probably not the weakest link in that process. The quality of the playback device is going to be your weakest link. So you got to make sure that you have a very good playback. You don't have a, like Bill was saying, a dented pinch roller, or you make sure the azimuth is aligned correctly on those heads before you do the playback. And if you have a SMPTE standard taper, you might want to just adjust the azimuth depending upon what that tape was recorded on, the machine that tape was recorded on. If it's not the same machine you're playing it back on, you may lose some high frequencies if the head is not aligned perfectly. And as well as you have to deal with stickage, and old tapes in particular have a problem of the magnetic oxide flaking off after a number of years, and many times they have to bake them in an oven to get them to re-adhere to the polymer that is the backing of the tape. So you have to deal with that. And of course, if you have a great, a high-end system like Carl was showing there to digitize it, you'll also be digitizing the tape hiss and all the other imperfections of that analog along with it. The things you don't want.
And there are some things to watch out for. I'm just going to say real quick before Peter finishes up for us. Don't run them back and forth. Don't play them for your neighbors and the rest of that, because what Courtney was saying is true. Old tape binders get fragile and you can actually lose oxide and lose signal. So you want to hold off, do it once, do it with the best signal chain you can, and see if you can capture whatever is left there. Peter, you had a last set of thoughts?
Well, I was going to bring up the point about old audio tapes are just like old videotapes. They decompose over time. So that's just something to remember. And some of the material was not exactly healthy friendly.
Yeah.
So don't breathe it in.
Yeah. So get to them. Get to those old tapes. If you really want to presume, get to them faster rather than slower, because it's not getting any better and it's going to constantly get worse. Mickey wanted to weigh in on this.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what the format of tape you are trying to digitize. Hopefully, you know, as Courtney mentioned earlier, how they were recorded. Because we've been seeing a lot of remixes and remasters lately of people, you know, remixing older tracks to Atmos, wherein things have not been cataloged completely, and sometimes there are some tracks on the 24 track tape that are recorded with Dolby, and that means, of course, you need to read it out of the tape with Dolby processor. But while some other reels do not have it, so hopefully you have a lot of information there in the catalog of the tape that you're trying to digitize.
Yeah, and one last thing, because these things are all real issues when you're trying to go back to legacy tapes. There is not one format. So even in a 1/4-inch tape, you might get half track, you might get quarter track. That is the number of individual channels that the magnetic heads lay down on the track. And it gets even more complex when you get into bigger tape formats. So just knowing what you're dealing with and playing it on a machine that has a capacity, like if you're in quarter track stereo, you might have a cassette tape that goes both directions. So it's going to have 1 and 3 being left and right on the first side. And when you flip the tape over and play the other side, 2 and 4 become 1 and 3 going in the other direction. So there's just a lot of formatic confusion that can snap you if you don't kind of pay attention to some research. Mitchell, you had another last
just
thought?
add a little to what Mickey was saying. If you have a 24-track tape, it could be Dolby, but it could also be Dolby SR, which is another flavor of Dolby, which came out a little bit later on. And there's DBX that people use. So all of those things were popular formats. And the quality of the tape and the tape being used, I think, again, a lot of those masters usually came across a Ampex tape, 456, I think was the formula. That has its own EQ and different things. So there's all kinds of crazy stuff with tape to get matched up to the proper equalization curves with the deck that you're playing it back on.
But Samuel, good luck in getting it done, and just ping us back and let us know if you get good results. Whatever is on there, if it's historically valuable to you, we hope you have success with getting it translated. Let's go on to the next question.
Douglas Carmichael is here for Mega Events. Is Dante the audio transport of choice, or have most of that still stuck back at Midi?
Mickey?
You will get a whole salad of different protocols in a large event. You will need to you would need to be able to bridge those multiple protocols. You'll have Midi, you'll have Dante, you'll have all sorts of things. And in many occasions, because with large events, you often have multiple vendors coming in to do different parts of the production. You have a different vendor that's doing the front of house sound, a different vendor that's doing the broadcast sound, and like even with Dante. Even if everyone is on Dante, vendors usually do not want to share the same Dante network. So if I'm the broadcast truck and I want to link up the front of house or monitor world to get ISO feeds, I do not want monitor world to be able to control my Dante network. So you often have to bridge those two networks. Companies like SSL have Dante bridges that can essentially go Dante to Dante, but not transport the control protocols between those two networks. So in a large event, you'll have all sorts of protocols that you have to deal with.
Carl, do not you dare go license Protocol Salad as your company name. I'm going to sneak over and get that afterwards. You have some thoughts on this?
So essentially the big difference between Dante and Midi is point to point. So essentially it's a digital snake, whereas Dante is networkable. So you can run it. As Mickey said, there are bridges. So you can have Dante to Midi, which, there's a million of those out there. You can have, as you said, Dante to Dante. Tascam have a good ones for analog to Dante, which that's what just a box that just does that, doesn't do anything else. But yeah, so you will have all these different kind of formats. Monitor world, maybe analog, because it has the lowest latency, so maybe analog in monitor world, so it depends. But essentially you've just got to be used to understanding that there's going to be millions of different formats, and you just need to have boxes that translate one to another with the lowest latency you can possibly get.
Nice. Let's move on to the next question.
And it's from Javier Alfaro in Mexico City, Mexico. Has anyone been using Frame.io C2C regularly? How has it helped your post workflow?
Carl is going to weigh in.
So we're hearing a lot of things, maybe Adobe buying Frame.io, maybe good for Frame.io, and the people who created Frame.io have been on the panel here. But it may be hurting Adobe because there's let's include Filmic Pro. So we say Filmic Pro is the fourth, but there are 3 other companies who are doing their own version of Frame.io. So they're doing their own version of Camera to Cloud. They're doing it internally. And these are the big ones. So we're talking Canon, we're talking Sony, and it looks like Arri's the only one who doesn't want to put it in their cameras. So they're happy to use the Teradek and do it the way that Adobe's doing it. But Sony and Canon have got patents now for their version of what we essentially is Camera to Cloud. So I think Adobe buying them may have been a bit of a problem, because Canon and Sony don't want to hook their wagon to the Adobe train.
It'd be interesting. I don't use it anywhere near as much as I used to. I haven't, and the couple of times I've been in there, it's been a little problematic. We used it back in the day for the band for people sending stems and things like that to me, particularly video clips. And I always like the thing a lot. Since the Adobe acquisition, I can't say anything has worked less well than it did before, but I just find myself less interested in being in that world. I know I do want to make it very clear that you do not have to have an Adobe subscription to use Frame.io, even in its current state. You can still keep the old accounts that were there, and they work just fine. But for some reason, I'm finding myself in there less, and I don't really know why. That's just a personal thing, I guess. Let's move on to the next question.
Greg Greckmeyer from Topping, Virginia. Suggestions for removing the HDMI audio from the ATEM Extreme outputs. Reduce the risk of leaking the streaming audio out into a room.
And Peter Sargent's going to start us off.
He focused on the output. And I mean, I find that if you go over to the audio panel on the software control, under the master output, there is a mute button. And that will definitely remove the audio at that point.
There you go. Yeah, mute. That seems correct. Tom Ferguson.
Well, the mute button is on the headphone jack, but what you might want to do is take a look at either the control panel or, again, in the software control. Every single input has a lot of defined audio controls. You have 3 rows of buttons, which include both the volume as well as each on-off switch. So you've got a lot of controls. So I just shut everything off except for camera 1, which I'm talking on.
There you go, Courtney.
And if you want to have audio on your main HDMI output, but only mute it on the feeds that's going to the monitors in the room, you can either just mute the monitors in the room, or you could take a cheap audio embedder like this one from JK or JTech Digital, and just build a little patch plug, use the analog input. This will take either analog or Toslink digital input and embed it in your HDMI signal and output HDMI signal with the new embedded audio. So just make a little patch plug that has a low impedance resistor, like 10 ohms across the input on it on a 3.5 millimeter plug, and plug that in as your analog input. So that will just generate a dead audio channel to replace the audio channel on everything that goes through that box and further down the line.
All right, let's get to our last question today. We got about a minute left in our first hour. So take it away, Mitch.
Robert Green from Los Angeles, California. What are your use cases for OBS in your workflow?
I look down below that and nobody has raised their hand. So I don't know if it's that nobody in the panel right now uses OBS. Oh, there we go. Okay, Carl and John, you have 30 seconds each and I'm locking it. Go ahead, Carl.
Every time I see OBS, I think of the Olympic Broadcasting Service. So I'm on a Mac, so I don't technically use it. I personally like to use hardware if I'm going to do this. There are some things that OBS would do, but it'd be better talking to some of the PC users here in the group as far as OBS is concerned.
And John.
I agree with everything that Carl just said. I run it on my Mac, but I don't use it in production because it's super easy to do key and fill and put graphics up and for video playback. So if you're going to run it, run on a PC.
Fair enough. All right. We've gotten to the top of the hour, and thank you, everybody, for your questions for the first hour, and thank everybody in the panel for adding their expertise to the discussion here. I was reminded in the chat today that our second hour topic, we are going to be focusing on audio troubleshooting tools as opposed to the process of it. So while we normally say we're open for everything, if you can focus there on the tools that you like, the ones that are good problem solvers, the one that you've learned are reliable, as opposed to here's my problem and can the panel solve it? We always try to do that whenever anybody asks a question like that. But the focus of this one is on what are the tools that are readily available out there that people can use for fixing audio issues. And in that respect, does anybody on the panel have any thoughts as we get into this, or should we just dive into the Q&A? We actually have quite a few questions here. I'm not seeing any hands raised. Oh, well, there you go, Mitch Hill. Mitch, you want to start off with a thought?
Yeah, tools come in many different shapes and sizes. For example, I have sitting behind me Neve 8801, which is a channel, pardon me, channel processor for a microphone. And that could be considered, they would fix my froggy throat here. Other tools might be plugins that you might use, like Izotope or Waves or any number of other. And there are built-in tools in every DAW out there. So there's a wide variety of things out there that you can do to modify your audio in many, many different ways.
Courtney?
Yeah, the rule is keep Mitch away from the Aphex plugins. Because as we've learned today, he sounds much better without them.
Well, and I wonder if there's a philosophical thought for a moment as we start off this. You know, people, I think, confuse repair and processing. You know, and I think what Mitch went through earlier today when we were chatting about it is a good example. He was using a particular tool because it got him a particular sound that he likes. And so that is a legitimate goal for many people who want to process audio. But it was noted that without that tool, it perhaps made other people's ears feel like it was a more natural sound and it was good. So, you know, where do you come down? How much processing do you need? And when do you move from I'm repairing a problem with my audio to I'm adding effects for an aesthetic purpose? Again, absolutely valid thing to do, but maybe trying to sound like James Earl Jones, if you are not James Earl Jones, by adding a lot of processing is a specious process, if I can use the term. You know, maybe sounding like the best version of you is a better thing than trying to sound like an iconic other announcer. Mitch, your thoughts?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that subject up, because it's not that I'm trying to sound like something I'm not, although it sounds that way. Broadcasters generally try to find a sweet spot where their voice cuts through things at a certain level. And to me, I was just emulating something I've been doing for 40 years with the microphone in front of me, is just to have that, you know, that pitchy voice that the blast on through. Times are changing, and maybe those times call for less processing and more natural sounding voices. The other thing that's interesting is that sometimes you're fixing a problem inherent to the voice, or maybe you're masking something that's inherent to the voice, and those are all, you apply tools to fixing those. Like, for example, my voice naturally has a bit of compression in it because I've learned to talk that way. You know, in conversation, would I talk like a radio guy? Probably not, but it comes naturally when a microphone's in front of me and I'm projecting a little bit. So I'm going to try without the Aphex for a while. Contain yourself, Mickey. Don't get too excited. And we'll see how that goes for everybody.
And you brought up a really good topic. I mean, sometimes people want, you know, punchy process. There are circumstances where, you know, I used to do what I call screamer spots for a car dealer, and they wanted your voice out in front of everything, and they wanted everybody to understand that it has fine Corinthian leather. And oh my gosh, if you don't shout that thing, the producer or the director will go, give me more punch. That is not, then in another era, we want you to sound like the friend next door. We want you to use a lot of contractions and just kind of be a buddy to somebody. Those are two different styles of delivery of the same stuff, your voiceover. And I think in all of these things, using the tools to get what the producer, director, whoever's paying you, using the tools to get what they want is the ultimate goal here, not necessarily what you think they should want. So anyway, let's dive into our actual question and answer and see if we can make some sense for everybody out there.
First question in from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. I've used software-based video switchers, wirecast, ecamm, vmix, but what would anyone recommend for software-based audio switchers? I've used software controls for many mixers, but never a pure computer running solution other than loopback.
Yeah, I think it was a routing solution, but Mickey's going to weigh in here.
Yeah, there are a good number of entities, a lot of them houses of worship, that do their web broadcast mix using DAWs. A lot of them use Pro Tools, Logic, Ableton. The thing with them, though, is unless you are running dedicated DSP, you definitely do not want to feed monitors from a DAW. But it's been done quite successfully for quite a while now.
Fair enough. Let's move on to the next question.
And next question in from Morgan Price in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. What is your approach to working with remote speakers, for example, in Zoom meetings, to improve their spoken word?
And Carl, start us off here.
So get them as closest to the microphone as they can if they've got a microphone. Get them to put noise reduction to low, not auto. Auto is the devil. Pretty much they're the two first things. And get them, generally, another thing you might want to do is just have them make sure they're using headphones, of course. So you want to get duplexed audio. But the other thing you want to probably keep aware of is ask if they've got like air conditioning and stuff on. If they've got the aircon on, can you ask them when they're doing their speech, their 5-10 minute speech, can they just turn the aircon or the fan off for those 5 or 10 minutes? And then as soon as they finish their speech, can they turn it back on? That'll help the noise suppression in Zoom as well.
Absolutely. Peter Sargent?
Well, I guess the key point there is, and it was part I was going to bring up, is try and get to the attendees ahead of time and walk them through what has to be done, how they should do it. To Carl's right on spot with what he said about what to do. But sometimes I've also asked them, because if you listen to their speech patterns, sometimes they have some interesting speech patterns. They're not very intelligible, and rehearsal then becomes the need to work with them way ahead of time and say, how do you talk into a microphone, or how do you talk into that mic on your earbud so that you're understandable?
Courtney.
Yeah, as Carl pointed out, get the microphone as close to them as possible. This will reduce the ratio of their voice to the echo of their voice within the room, the ambience within the room. But you have to be careful that they don't get right on top of that microphone and start generating plosives. So you have to have a pop filter like the one that's in front of Carl's microphone there that can intercept the breath as it comes out of your mouth before it can bottom out that capsule in that microphone when it's just a few inches away from you. So keep that in mind.
Mickey.
And on top of that, if possible, work with them in terms of determining a good room to do their contribution, and start as early in the chain as possible and fix that. So the person's actual, projection voice, and then that voice hits the room. So treat the room, and then work with your mic, get the mic close, as close as possible to get the best signal to noise ratio.
And Peter.
The thing I was focusing on when I looked at this is the word meeting, Zoom meetings, as opposed to Zoom events or something like we're doing here, to be honest. And I'm going to go back to some other conversations we've had on prior office hours, is if you can reach out to their assistant, if it's an executive, reach out to their assistant so that they can help you at the other end. Adjust things, like slide a note in front of the person and say, speak up, speak more clearly, move away from the mic, things like that. Because you need a back channel into the guy sometimes. I mean, this is for meetings per se, not for other things, right?
Courtney?
And Zoom does have fairly good noise removal algorithms. You can set them on automatic, low, medium, and high. So choose if they do have noise in the background, like I have today, because it's a hot day here. I'll turn off, my original sound is off. If I turn original sound on, you'll hear it turn off the noise correction. Now, I don't hear any difference here, but you probably hear a big difference there.
Substantial.
Hear my noisy air conditioner, and when I turn it on, you can see it does affect the quality of my voice somewhat, but it definitely removes the annoyance of that air conditioner in the background. And I think if you should do your tests with the noise removal intact in the way you're going to use it when you do the mic test. So it gives Zoom a chance to analyze the sound somewhat and calculate its noise removal. Also, if you have a device that does like noise assist in your Mix Pre 3, don't have competing noise removal routines running. In other words, turn off noise removal in Zoom if you're applying noise removal at the mixer, or turn off noise removal in the mixer if you're using the one in Zoom. Don't have competing noise removal because they will fight each other.
And I would add to all of this, if you're working with somebody who has to do this a lot, see if you can get them to the point where they actually are comfortable monitoring their own voice in real time. We all use either earpieces or headphones or something like that. And it's always seemed to me that not having a feedback from your microphone into your head so you can hear what it actually sounds like is the equivalent of trying to operate a camera with the view screen and the eyepiece covered over. If you can't actually hear what's happening with what you're doing, that's when you get plosives and you maybe have wet mouth syndrome and you're getting a lot of little snaps and things like that from being too moist. Those kind of things you will never notice unless you have some way to hear what your signal you're putting out is. Now, with execs and some people, sometimes that's a difficult thing. Trying to train somebody to be aware of popped P's, for example, can be difficult if they've never done it. And if you don't want to shut down their brain and make them focus on, oh my gosh, I'm popping my P's as opposed to getting their content out. But if they're going to be doing this over and over again, learning to listen to yourself perform and learning what to listen for in things that will annoy your audience and be aware of them so you can stop them when you hear them is a very useful thing in my experience. Let's go on to the next question.
Javier Alfaro in Mexico. Has anyone upgraded to Izotope RX 10? What do you think about the text navigation and multiple speaker detection tools?
Nobody's popped in a hand raise on this so far, so I'm not sure if anybody has worked with RX 10 yet. Oh, there was Mitchell Hills popped in on it. Sure.
I have not worked with it, and I'm just popping in because somebody needs to speak in favor of Izotope. They make great sound reduction tools and programs or plugins that'll fix problems. So it's a good tool set to have in your bag to fix audio, particularly in post-production.
Yeah, I will say they are acknowledged as a leader in the software processing of sound, particularly in the noise reduction field and in problem solvers for recordings and for live broadcasts. So yeah, they have a good reputation. Let's move on to the next question.
Tom Ferguson, Phoenix, Arizona, and right here on the panel, what's in your bag for troubleshooting audio on location?
Hey, we can do the rest of the show on this. Let's just, we're going to get to the first people. Carl Asmussen is going to start us off here.
So two very simple things. They're relatively cheap headphones. So Sennheiser's 280 Pros. So these are essentially, they naturally attenuate. So they're just passively attenuating. They kind of, if you're in a location and you've got other sounds in the environment, you kind of want to make sure what you're hearing is what you're hearing in the system. So I find the Sennheiser 280 Pros and a cable tester. So any cable tester will do. You can get a cheap one from, Sweetwater. Essentially, the main thing that this does, it's a tone generator and it checks the polarity of your cables too. So some people like to change polarity on their cables for like drum kits, for snares and stuff, and you don't know what's going on with that XLR cable. So this will tell you very quickly if they've changed the polarity on the cable. And it sends out tones, +4, -10, mic level. So you can pretty much get them any pretty brand you can get, as long as they're decent and they have the plug-in, plug-outs. Pretty much any brand will do. Behringer here is $37, but anything up to about $100. I think RME has one for, oh no, not RME, Radial has one for about $200. It does a little bit more than what this is essentially a ripoff of the Radial one. But the Radial one has a few extra features that this doesn't have, but it costs a bit more as well.
Mitch.
Yeah, I like that XLR tester that Carl has there. The other thing, and I hate to be flippant about this, but just clap your hands when you walk into a room and use your ears. That's probably your best and first test. You're listening for the reverb time, or RT60 as they call it, in the room, and you can tell a multitude of problems you're going to have just by doing that one little thing.
And when you clap in a big space and it comes back to you half a second later, you know you're in trouble. So let's go on to the next Tom Ferguson.
I have a tone generator made by Shure. It's the A15TG. This thing's over 50 years old. The only change that's been in it is it doesn't work on mercury batteries anymore. It works on alkaline, but it's got the XLR in and acts like a microphone.
Courtney Gooden.
Carol said a monitoring device, headphones work great, but I use something like this. This is a little Bluetooth Amazon basic stereo amplifier speaker. Has its own internal batteries. You just charge it up and it'll run 8 or 9 hours on that. And I have an adapter on the back that goes, I have adapters that'll go from the 1/8-inch stereo plugs to XLR cables. They're short, they're only about 6 inches long. But it allows you to plug it into any audio source and check the audio that's coming out of the amplifier. That's useful if you're, unlike headphones, if you're trying to troubleshoot where the audio is being stopped, you put that on the output, and then you work your way back up the chain, which may be farther away from that speaker than your headphone cord will reach. And then when you hear the sound coming out of the speaker, you know you've found where the break is in the audio pathway.
Mickey?
Yeah, I think you're correct, Bill. This could be a full hour or two.
Easily.
But yeah, on top of what Tom showed earlier, the Shure tone generator, which is super reliable. You can drop it, kick it, it will still work. A simple multitester can help you so much. Can give you allow you to test continuity, check on voltage if you're getting proper 48-volt phantom power, or what do you call this, electric power, 5 volts or 3 volts. Also a Whirlwind Q box, which is similar to the device that Carl showed earlier. It can test your cables, show you if things are wired up correctly or incorrectly, and how they which pins may be switched in the wiring, and it could also act as a line level speaker, and also a signal generator, and also on top of that, Sound Devices MM1, which is a fantastic preamp on its own, but it could also help you test long microphone lines, and it also has a line level 1/4-inch input that can feed a very, very high quality headphone amp built right into the box. Sound Devices MM1.
And for me, it's just been a change. I came out of the analog era, so we used to have all sorts of cable testers and humbuckers and ground lifts and things like that, because the analog world was full of things that could pick up random noise from engines, refrigerators, any sort of motor, and so having tools that took care of that was critically important. Now that most audio is migrating very rapidly, except for microphones and things like that, migrating to digital, where you are as likely to have a USB or a USB Type-C input or connection to a audio device as you are the old analog stuff. I find I don't pull them out as much. But in my years of main practice, one of the things I used to carry most often was a 10, 15, and 20 dB pad, because I found myself in a lot of really loud circumstances, and I had to cut down audio out of microphones a good little bit. I remember a rocket car once that had a jet engine on the back of it, and even I had to pack 2 of those things in line to get the signal down to the point where I could actually hear what the thing kind of sounded like. Crazy loud. Let's move on to the next question, but good question. Bring it up again, or maybe somebody should make a note of that for a second hour. I think it'd be fun.
Josh Kaufman is here from Pittsburgh, PA. Josh asks, office hours had an entire second hour on audio scopes. Perhaps we'll have another one. What are the panel scopes of choice? And for which problems analysis are there any apps that use smart alternatives for specific problems?
Mitchell.
I'm a big fan of the durometers, which you're seeing over my head here, and here's a little bit of a closer shot of it. And what's significant about the durometers are that you can see RMS and peak all at the same time. So in a sense, that becomes an audio scope. So I'm looking at that meter right now, and I can see that the average level is just about where it needs to be. And you can see that little bouncing cursor at the top. That's reading the peak levels. And one of the things that tells me is loudness, because the closer those two things get together, the louder the sound is. So it's just a useful little a tool for checking it's not actually an oscilloscope. If you had an oscilloscope or a scope device like that, you might put the left and the right channels in there and look at the resultant waveform to determine where the energy of the mixed audio is.
Mickey.
Yes, similar to Mitchell. I grew up metering with, and Mitchell has corrected me with this in the past, how you pronounce it, the row meters, correct, Mitch? The row?
Duro, Mike Duro.
Yeah. I grew up using the row meters, but nowadays, since a lot of delivery specs are in loudness, I've relied a lot on the Izotope Insight and also Waves, the BLM meters.
Courtney.
I recently got, I like to shop for gadgets and things. I recently got one of these. This is a mini oscilloscope and component tester all in one. And it's tiny. You can hold it in the palm of your hand there. Everything for reference there, but it's very tiny, runs on rechargeable batteries. It not only shows you the waveform, it's only good up to a megahertz or so it's great for audio, not so great for anything else in the computer world. But it will show you the waveform. It'll also tell you the voltage, peak-to-peak voltage. You can use it to measure. It gives you digital readouts of the frequency of the sound and the voltage, so you can use it for testing, doing frequency sweeps. It also is a component tester, so you can actually test resistors, capacitors, transistors, and it gives you all kinds of readouts on each one of those, and it automatically detects what it is and tells you what it is after you plug it in and turn it on. And it's only about $50, $60.
There has been a big change in the industry. When I was coming up, everything was on separate devices. You used to have a waveform monitor, vector scope, and they were on CRTs, and you lugged them around. Now most laptops have suite of test tools from various manufacturers, and they are remarkably accurate, at least the ones that I've seen in the last maybe 10 years or so. So you can do most of the testing on a simple laptop with the correct software, so long as you get the signal into it without messing with that signal too much. And there are ways to do that. So I'm just seeing less and less of the use, although I love that, Courtney. And, on location, if I'm out and you want to measure sound at the point of the person you have microphoned, you have mic'd up and ready to go on, to be able to carry a tool out to that person so that you're getting the sound profile there as opposed to on the lines or whatever can be really useful. John Preto wanted to get onto this before we finish.
If you like to be heckled by Mickey and you have 1U rack space left, you get an American DJ LED bar. And I run Dante from my PC, DVS, into my X32, and then this is hooked up to the output of the X32.
Good old American DJ rack filler.
Yeah. I have a couple of things. See, I pulled out a couple of my old Elation, which is a company like American DJ that tends to do things, but just for switches. That's what I turn on every morning when I come to my rack. I can turn on one switch and it turns on 12 devices, so I don't have to have all these wires. I do have all the wires, but I don't have them all in separate switches. I've only got one of them that turns them all on, so the other one I have to hit 9 switches every morning, and that drives me crazy. I may replace it. John Preto and then Mitch.
Yeah, John, I guess he's already talked. John, I'm
Sorry,
very
Mitch.
envious because your little DJ Chauveau device there, what is it, about $90?
$99.
And I spent $1,000 on my durometer here just for flash. So who's the smarter man here?
We're going to move on to the next question.
The next question is from Mitch Hill. Dante or Rogue Amoeba, whatever that is, that creature. Which would you choose to route audio?
Rogue Amoeba sounds like a sequel to the Three Amigos, and that sounds like it would be fun. Anyway, no one has clicked on this either. Both of them highly talked about. We mentioned them all the time on the show, both being really well used, and now everybody's piling in. So we're going to start with Mitch, go to John Preto, and then Mickey will finish this up. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Rogue product is great, but I like purpose-built, bespoke devices, and I'm really kind of into this Dante Avio. I've got these little modules that I'm building up here, and although I'm not using the full capabilities of it, if I want to route stuff around, that's a great way to do it, and it's also a distribution app, just like I guess Loop does or Hijack does. So I'm kind of liking the hardware solution.
And we're going to Hershey next because he just weighed in, and then John.
One thing that I do want to make sure to let people know that Rogue Amiga is only Mac only, so you do not have PC, I don't believe, with most of their product. And hardware is good.
And just so that you don't go looking on Google and have trouble finding it, the company's name is Rogue Amoeba, single-celled organism, not Buddy, south of the border. So anyway, let's move on to the next. The next one's John Preto, and then Mickey.
Harshid, there's no other computer other than a Macintosh. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, there is the Rogue Amiga.
Yeah. Like anything in life, Mitch, you do everything. You have both Dante and Rogue Amiga, Hijack and audio, Hijack and Loopback, both. We have some very sophisticated audio hijack chains set up for our meetings where we've got 5 or 6 different breakout rooms, and we're having to route audio into all the rooms and then do mix minuses. And so we used all the technologies.
I'm laughing because they probably spent $100,000 on marketing, getting that name branded in one show. All I can think of is the Rogue single-celled animals. I can't think of the actual name of the company anymore. Mickey, help us, save us.
The products from Rogue Amoeba and also Dante are designed to do quite different things. Dante is designed to transport audio between multiple Dante-enabled devices. That includes, hardware, computers, mixers, interfaces, and all that. The products from Rogue Amoeba are designed to route between applications and audio interfaces within a single computer. So if you need to transport audio to a different computer, Dante. If you need to pull audio from Chrome and send it out to Zoom, use the Rogue Amoeba stuff.
Perfect. Thank you. Tom Ferguson.
Well, I find the Rogue Amoeba products to be the best probiotic for solving audio problems, and it's also on sale for 20% off this week.
Oh, there we go. So at risk of sounding more and more like QVC, let's move on to the next question.
Next question from Marty Ateas from Maryland, USA. Has anyone successfully used software plugins on a computer with an X32 in a live situation?
And Carl.
So, yeah, it can be done. So Waves are the ones who do it. So this is a hardware setup you'll need to add to your X32. So you need the card and you'll need a server. So this is the basic server. There's actually a package that Waves is doing at the moment for $2,300 where you actually get everything. So you'll get this, you get the server, you get the card. The only thing you have to add yourself is the X32 or the M32 from Midas. The package combo at the moment that's $2,300 will also come with 6 plugins and all the other hardware you'll need. But yeah, so this is how you do it through Waves SoundGrid.
Perfect. Thank you for the solution. Next question.
Josh Kaufman from Pittsburgh, PA. What computer software would be useful for noise reduction for a participant outside of Zoom for contribution?
Carl's going to help us with live. Go ahead.
So there is this plugin in Logic. So as Mickey said, you can use a DAW as like a mixer, and Logic does have this, and you can actually, they've rolled it into Final Cut now as well. So it's called noise reduction in Final Cut, and then in Final Cut you can actually use Logic plugins or Logic actual effects in Final Cut. I would suggest against it, but I've heard that it can be done if you monitor with that particular plugin running. It'd probably run better on an M processor than on an Intel, but latency may be an issue there as well.
Peter Sargent.
Well, you can buy some plugins that will plug into Audio Hijack, and I have used Loopback and Audio Hijack to filter it with mixed results, admittedly, but it can be done.
And Peter, you're coming in pretty quietly. You snuck down around -30, so just letting you know. Mickey?
Yeah, I think my go-to, first off, for broadband noise suppression, would be Cedar Studio, DNS Studio. And then under that would probably be Waves WNS, and there's also the Waves Clarity VX plugin. As I mentioned earlier, I would, as much as possible, try to run it within dedicated DSP chips so that you have A, reliability, and B, much, much lower latency than processing on a computer CPU. But those are things that have been used quite successfully.
Fair enough. Next question.
Next question in from Robert Shoji in Los Angeles, California. What is a recent audio-related problem you've had, and how did you solve it?
Mitch is going to start us off.
Well, I had this AFX channel thing here, and the only problem I've had, not how it sounds, but the problem I've had is the commentary from other panelists about don't use it. So I guess I'm succumbing to what's called peer pressure, solving a problem just by hitting a bypass switch.
There you go. Nobody else has weighed in on this, and I'm shocked. There's all sorts of audio problems. And, the thing about audio, it seems to me it has always been more difficult than, for example, video problems, which I've solved, because you can see a video problem. And I know you can hear an audio problem, but for many people who haven't been trained to understand what the sound of specific audio problems are so that they link them in. I mean, there's simple ones like a 60 cycle hum in the US where that's our line frequency for AC. And if there's a ground lifted, I think everybody on this panel who works in the US knows what that sounds like and go, oh, okay, there's a ground loop, there's a hum somewhere. I'm going to do the standard, go looking for things where the ground is lifted or not lifted and try to lift it to fix it. There are other things that it's really, you have to have pretty trained ears. You can get into I know something's wrong, but I don't know what area it's wrong in. And they can be terribly difficult to track down. I'm going to let Courtney finish, and then depending on how much time, it looks like we're okay in time. I may tell you a story of one that absolutely drove me crazy. And still to this day, I look back and until you face something like the one I faced, you don't understand how to even think about fixing it. But let's go to Courtney first and then Peter. Courtney?
Yeah, ground loops are always a problem on the set. You have to check, what equipment has grounded outlets on it, what doesn't, and make sure no one has cut the ground pin off of a grounded cable, because a lot of people do that when they have ground problems. Get your ground lifter to do that temporarily, because cutting the grounding pin off an AC cable is illegal in the United States. So it could, get you in trouble if you cause a fire or electrocute somebody someday. Another problem I've had is with everything that uses these USB power these days. A lot of audio accessories and stuff use USB power. And you might want to power them off of batteries for the best solution. If you're powering off with something like this, which is an AC power supply that has multiple DC outputs on USB-A type connectors there, these things have switching power supplies in them to get down to 5 volts, and they're switching at a very high frequency. And if they're not properly filtered, that high frequency can leak into your audio chain and be demodulated or beat against another high frequency if it hasn't been filtered out carefully and end up in the audible range. And so you might want to just remove anything that has a DC switching power supply from the mix and see if your noise problems go away, because a lot of times that will be the source of the noise. I found this especially true in laptop power supplies. Laptop power supplies a lot of times will inject a high frequency noise into an audio channel because all of their audio inputs and outputs are unbalanced, and they have a tendency to leak in there.
And Peter.
Well, I was going to relate a problematic story I had from at the start of the pandemic period where I was encouraged somebody to use earbuds to, back to your point earlier about listening to yourself and listening so you had full bidirectional meetings. And they were very hesitant, and they were recalcitrant to tell me why, and but I finally convinced them to do it. And then I found out why they were recalcitrant. They were hard of hearing and they had to take out their hearing aids. So they started yelling into the mic because they couldn't hear themselves the right way.
Yeah.
So that's a different type of sound problem, but you have to be cognizant of problems potentially at the other end.
Well, I'll take a couple of minutes to do my longer story. And I've told this, I think, once or twice before during the 2 years I've been on office hours, but I was hired kind of at the last minute to come in and help with sound on a shoot for a commercial. And it featured the golfer Casey Martin, who some of you remember from back at the turn of the last century, in the 1999, 2000, had been a PGA golfer, excellent golfer, but he had a serious disability. He had circulation problems in his leg. He would eventually lose his leg to that. It was really a tragedy. Anyway, I got hired to help with sound. So I was out on the golf course with Mr. Martin, and he was an amazing golfer. I mean, we set him up like 30 feet from the pin, and he kept making these putts like over and over again. And we were just standing in awe. But on sound, he had a line to deliver, and I was listening in the headphones, and I heard this weird sound. I'd never heard anything like it before. It was kind of a, and it happened, and I went, "What was that?" And I monitored, listened carefully. On the next take, it didn't happen. I thought, okay, I guess maybe it's a battery problem or something. Sure enough, another 2 minutes go by, and then I hear it again, and I'm going, and that time it was in a take. So I had to call, I'm sorry, we've got to do that. I had an audio glitch and I don't know what happened. And I was on a good Sennheiser wireless system. I even thought about trying to replace it with a hard cable, but I couldn't do that because it was on green and he was putting and there was nothing around him. And there was no way other than digging up the green that I could hide a cable. And I just had a vexing day on the golf course trying to get that, because it ruined about 4 of our takes over the next 20 or so. And as I packed up my gear and I was driving away really frustrated that I hadn't been able to do the immaculate job that I had hoped to on that gig. And I drove by where we were, which was the Tournament Players Club in Scottsdale, right past the Scottsdale airport. And I looked up and there's the radar for the company. And the radar was going around and taking 2 minutes to make its pass around. And every time it hit my wireless system, I would get, and how do you prepare for that? That's the mystery of sound. I mean, you don't really have, you can't solve a problem until you figure out what it is. And it could be something really odd like that if I'd been in any other location at any other time, or if I had had 5 wireless packs and I maybe could have gone to something digital, I might have been able to stop it. But it was just a vexation that you had to learn from. And from that point on, every time I went to a location to do sound, I would at least look around the area and see if there's something weird happening. Pete Sargent wants to get on this, and so does Courtney. Pete? Peter, he looks like he's dropped out. Sorry about that. All right, Courtney.
No, I'm here.
Oh, you are?
You already talked to me.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I guess that hadn't gotten highlighted. So we're moving to Courtney.
I was just going to say the radar issue has been an issue for me too, especially if you're shooting on a destroyer or a naval vessel where they have high power radar for an aircraft carrier. But it not only comes into wireless microphones, it actually comes into any analog transformer that you have, and it can be it can get into the audio chain just over a wire. It doesn't even have to, even if you're using wired microphones, you can hear those hits from high power radar. Because
well, it was the first time I ran into them, and I was not a happy camper that day trying to do my job. Peter?
Well, if we're going to do that, it will affect anything. I can speak to Transport Canada built a brand new 200,000 foot data center right next to the main control tower, main radar tower for the Ottawa airport. And I will say there were like half a dozen of us vendors, because I was working for IBM at the time, who got sent up there to find, why are we having these odd failures of all the computers in the machine room? They finally had to rebuild the machine room with a giant Faraday cage. I mean, something that would hold 200,000 square feet of raised floor.
Yeah.
Because they weren't going to, I mean, they couldn't move the radar. It needed to be next to the airport.
Right. And no, it's just you run into crazy things like that. And so that's why problem solving, for me, audio problems is something where you just have to spend time doing your job and learn these little things. And there's 100 things like that. Oh, wait, I hear this and I don't like it. What could be causing it? And if eventually you solve it, you put that in your bag of tricks in the back of your mind and go, the next time I hear that sound, I'll at least know where to start to fix it. Let's move on to the next question.
From Wouter in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, any tips for a soundboard application on Windows or Mac with Midi to have physical buttons?
And we're going to start with Carl.
So pretty much the gold standard for this is going to be Novation's Launchpad Pro Mark III. So this is the Pro version. It includes Ableton Live 11 Lite. Lite's all you'll need. You'll need the Lite version if you want to use it as a soundboard. And if you get into more music production, then you'll just upgrade to the newer versions or the larger versions, the Pro versions and the standard version. But this is it. And there's pretty much probably about 100 videos on YouTube that will show you how to make a soundboard with this exact setup. So it's a very common thing, especially for gamers. So gamers like to use this kind of thing or something very similar to when they're doing live streams on Twitch.
Nice. Mickey McIntyre.
Yeah, definitely the Novation Launchpad is the king of trigger pads. But aside from using Ableton to actually play out the samples, there are a lot of other sampling plugins or virtual instruments that you can use to create your own soundboard. One of them being Native Instruments battery. It's a very, very powerful tool. We've created like even Foley footsteps patches for battery that have a lot of automated dynamics to it that adjust pitch and volume and attack and decay automatically. Very, very powerful Native Instruments battery. Another controller you might want to consider is the Midi Fighter. Aside from having the actual buttons that have nice little arcade game style buttons, it also has XY controls. So you can actually move the controller and it can control whatever parameter you want it to adjust.
Ooh, that sounds like fun. All right, I think we're on to the next question.
Douglas Carmichael, Mickey mentioned the need to bridge between multiple audio networking protocols on large events. What hardware has been most used for said task?
And Mickey's going to help us with that.
Yeah, there's a lot of solutions from companies like Ferrofish. Ferrofish has different kinds of format converters as well as APSys. RedNet also has a lot of converters that can bridge between Dante and other formats like Midi. SSL also has a lot of them. RME. One popular one that can embed and de-embed from SDI is SoundFX, and amongst other products they sell. But primarily what I see is Ferrofish and APSys.
There you are. This is why office hours exist. Lots of good suggestions for where to start to fix your problem. Next question.
Josh Kaufman from Pittsburgh, PA, and occasionally on the panel. How does the panel use their ears as tools in assessing and diagnosing audio? What areas are best left to the technician's ears rather than misuse the purpose of other tools like VU meters, EQ, displays, etc.?
Carl's going to address this first.
So your ears are a good start in like a fault decision tree. So your ears should always be included somewhere in the fault decision tree to actually figure out which way to go on that tree. Then you're going to go to like a real-time analyzer, something like that to actually figure out exactly what's going on. You're going to have other tools, but your ears are definitely going to be part of the decision tree to figure out which way to go.
That makes sense. Mitchell?
I'm with Carl on that. The first thing I listen to when I do a corporate event is to check to make sure everything's in phase. I mean, out-of-phase speakers do happen. And if your ears are sensitive to it, you can spot it instantly. And the other thing is microphones that are on the verge of feeding back. It's just one of those little pet peeves. I'll go over and whistle at it next to the frequency that seems to be doing it if it goes over. I've done all that diagnosis with just the stuff between my ears.
Courtney?
A couple of things. If you're as old as most of us here on the panel, a couple of exceptions. Make sure you have your hearing tested every year. because as you get older, you lose high frequency response, and most people do after they get out of their teens. So if you're using your ears for critical listening, just bear in mind the fact that your ears themselves may be coloring the sound just for you, and you may not be hearing an offensive sound that's happening for everybody else. Another thing I found that working as a sound mixer for many years in the field is listen on mono headphones instead of stereo headphones, because your brain has a way of filtering out certain sounds based on their locale, which it gets through stereo imaging of the sound coming in your ears. So if you're listening on mono headphones, you will hear the sound coming in both ears at the same time. So your brain will be less likely to filter out obnoxious noises that are actually being recorded on the track. And so it'll help you get a more accurate read on what's going to be recorded if you listen through both ears.
And Mickey.
Same signal.
Oh, sorry, Courtney, I thought you were done. Mickey?
Yeah, I think in terms of how we use our ears to address and diagnose issues, it's something that you pick up at the more and more that you are within an audio production world. You encounter issues that audio issues, of course, they would be something that would be audible because it's sound. So you can hear what that issue sounds like. Then that would be stored in your brain. And once you come across that same sort of noise or sound that you want to eliminate, you can make that link between, okay, when I hear this, it's usually caused by this, and you can go down that chain of troubleshooting. But ears should always be part of working with sound. You use your ears to diagnose audio issues, not your eyes.
John Preto.
Josh, whatever you do, don't go to too many AC/DC concerts because you can't hear above 13K. If you go into McDonald's and turn this dog whistle on, all the kids will hold their ears and the parents won't hear it at all. It's the funnest thing ever.
Okay, that's interesting. I do think there's, one of the things I think we've done, those of us who've been around sound for a long time, is that you learn when objective and when subjective testing can be integrated together. So if I walk into something and I'm trying to figure out, okay, I'm hearing something I don't like. It's a whistly kind of thing. That means it's going to be high frequencies. You open up a scope, you're not even looking at the low end. You just understand intuitively that kind of sound is going to live up here in the top range. So you sort of like dial into that and see if you can see something that there's a frequency, and is it a fixed frequency or is it a range of frequencies that are being somehow amplified that you don't want to have amplified. And so it's that combination of I've been using scopes long enough to know that when I hear this, I should look there in that mode to really do a good job of inspecting it. And the first time you just open up a scope, you don't really know what is this supposed to look like. So you kind of don't know when things are wrong as well as when you spend some years in it and you've seen these displays over and over again. Just how it kind of works. Let's move on to the next one.
And it's for me. I have a question. Sound devices, noise assist, or Cedar DNS, which is the best?
Mickey and Carl are going to weigh in. Mickey, you go first.
Yeah, the noise assist is good if you want a single parameter to adjust. Cedar DNS, which is different from SDNX, which is available on the 8 series, gives you a lot more parameters. DNS. The rack mount or desktop style DNS processors give you faders that can adjust multiple parameters of multiple frequency bands. So it gives you way more control. So if you're looking for something simple that's just one parameter, noise assist might be better for you. But if you want more control, then go with a proper hardware DNS box.
Carl.
Get rid of the noise. So that's why I say that's the best. If you want to know what the best is, get rid of any noise that's in your environment. So recording studios don't have fans in them. Recording studios don't have lights that make noise that don't have fans in them as well. So get rid of the noise. it's always best to spend, he only has to spend maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes working on your environment or working on the environment you happen to be working in. Let's say you're in a house of worship. Just walk around while no one's there and just figure out where all that noise is coming from and see if you can turn everything off. So the only thing you probably can't turn off sometimes is, HVAC, that kind of stuff. But most modern houses of worship, most modern venues will have HVAC kind of outside and then plumb through these baffled ducts. So therefore the sound actually doesn't come through that much. It's very limited. So usually eliminate noise. Sometimes the silly noises that we bring in are lights. So you can actually get fanless lights now. So Godox has a 150 watt fanless light, completely fanless light. There's no light in there. And the other lights have the ability to go to silent mode. So they can run at like 50% in silent mode. So if you're in a production environment. So just look at those scenarios of getting rid of all the noise you can, because one light, you go, oh yeah, it doesn't make much noise. When you add like 6 lights in the set, they start to add up. It just starts to add up.
Yeah, I'm going to support that. Sometimes if you can find the source of the noise and kill it there, it's much easier than trying to process it out later. That's why I have a voice booth sitting over there. It's not because that room can't be made to sound good. It can. But no matter what's going on, if I have to get a voiceover session done at 2:00 in the afternoon on a Friday, and there's traffic somewhere around, I used to be in my old studio. Thankfully, it's pretty quiet here. But walking in there and closing the door and having all that baffling instantly available means I'm going to get that voiceover done in the right amount of time and be able to bill for it. And that's easier. Even putting in and assembling a voice booth inside a room was a simpler solution than trying to notch out all the problems in a regular room with air conditioning and everything else. Horses for courses. Let's go to the next question.
From Morgan Price in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, what do panelists think of vocal booths to go mass-loaded vinyl blankets used in their, I'm going to guess, sound booth production booths to help with noise? And here's a link to it.
Oh, boy, we could spend some time on this. Let's start with Courtney and then Mickey.
Yeah, I was hoping we'd start with Mickey, but I just looked at it, and to get sound isolation. Now, this isn't to stop sound reflection necessarily, but to isolate you from ambient noise that's surrounding you. Let's say you got to get into a closed airspace, which means you got to cut off the air. And I would think something like this, which is vinyl and dark colored, and if it's outdoors, it's going to turn into a little oven very quickly. And I'm not sure how well it will work if you're, sitting in there at 130 degrees, how well it's going to work for that. And also in a windstorm, it might be a problem too, because vinyl tends to make noise when it blows around and flaps around, being a non-rigid material. So I'm not sure how well it would work. I'd be skeptical, although I have never tried this.
Mickey?
Yeah, same here. It may help in some, very specific situations, but you can't beat physics.
Amen to everything said. My test was if I could go in and put a smoke generator where the microphone was and set it off, if that smoke got into the room, this is bad vocal isolation. That's the way sound propagates in all directions. Now, yes, you may filter some high frequencies between the pickup and the thing creating the voice. That's usually, your mouth and the microphone. And so if there's some high frequency stuff, if there's an air conditioning or a fan or something that's doing a hissy kind of a thing, that could mute some of that a little bit. But in terms of isolation, if your goal is to do a traditional voice booth where you are in an absolutely audio neutral environment and all you are hearing is that announcer or that person speaking, most of these do not do that very well at all. Mickey?
And yeah, just to quickly touch upon what Courtney mentioned earlier about reflections. Yes, to an extent, it can help with maybe taming down some longer reverbs, but having this much material so close to the microphone and it being vinyl based, can induce early reflections into your recording. So that's something to watch out for.
Yeah, it may be a tiny bit better than those little foam boxes people put around microphones. Those to me make every single microphone, no matter how good it is, sound tubby and not very good. So I'm not a big fan of those.
Reflection filters.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of crazy, but that's marketing versus acoustics. Let's move on to the next question.
Josh Kaufman, Pittsburgh, PA, asking what tools and knowledge is useful for ringing out a room? Can the job be done if you only have your ears to tackle the task?
Mickey's going to start us off.
Tools, a fader and also a multi-band equalizer. Bring up the fader, start stirring out, adjust the appropriate frequency. Bring up the fader a bit more. It starts to ring again, bring down the appropriate frequency. Just keep on repeating that.
Mitchell?
I have a slight case of tinnitus, so I just use my ears.
You're always notching out wherever your tinnitus lands. Is that it? Courtney.
It rings.
There you go.
A pair of hands. And I always walk into a room and I have cameramen make fun of me all the time. When I walk into a room, I'll listen to the echo back and I'll figure out where there's problems with flat surfaces that are kicking back that sound to me, and I'll try and put up some type of sound blanket or something in front of the source, and I'll use the directionality of my ears, like Mitch said, to determine where that slapback is coming from. And sometimes you won't notice it. I'll tell you one thing that creates a lot of problems is water pipes within walls. They can create a crazy metallic twangy echo that you won't notice until you give it a percussive sound like clapping your hands together, and that can create havoc, and it actually can generate an echo where you wouldn't think there would be one. So water pipes and walls can generate strange, metallic type echoes, and you won't see them. You'll only hear them if you generate a pulse noise in their neighborhood. Listen to it back.
Carl? And real quick, we're running out of time here. I didn't realize it's...
So as far as tools, there are like a handful of tools that you will find in generally usually installed in most venues. You actually don't have to bring them yourself. So the chipsets in these come from TC Electric. These are the Behringer versions because Behringer bought TC Electronic. So essentially the top one is the dynamic EQ. It actually is a real-time analyzer. It does everything. The next one is a feedback destroyer, which is really just like a really high-powered EQ, which can actually pull down notches. Essentially, it does it automatically, but you can manually do it. So if you ring out a room and you have to do it, you'll find these feedback destroyers in a lot of house of worships and many different brands, but this is just one. And the last one's just a digital crossover. So again, these are just very basic tools. You find them in many brands, but this kind of trilogy here is kind of found in certain live applications. You wouldn't use these in production, so this is not for production. If you've got production, you've got to control all that stuff. But if you're in a live venue, especially an older venue where it's just literally a box, a square, then you may need to get a feedback destroyer and that kind of stuff, because feedback destroyer will hurt the sound quality, but it'll protect the speakers and protect your guests from suing you for damaging their hearing.
Because so many people deal with this, I'm going to do something real quick, but I'm going to try to get it done. One of the things I do when I go into a new voice circumstance, when I move my microphones or go to a different room, I go ahead and do a voiceover in the place, and then I bring that into my Final Cut and open up Logic's tools in there, open a channel EQ, make the Q or the spread of frequencies that channel EQ is affecting as small as possible, run it up all the way to the top, play back that voiceover, and I just scan down there. And I can't tell you the number of times that when I've scanned down, somewhere in the mid-range, I'll hear some awful peak because the room is really supporting something I don't want supported. And then I know I can notch that out, and it makes it a lot better. So I do that 3 or 4 times to find the room nodes and just notch them out. And often I get a whole lot more clarity in my recordings because of that. All right, let's move on to the next question. We're running out of time here.
Douglas Carmichael, I've seen Novation Launchpads used for non-musical applications like lighting control and sound effects playback. Where have you seen Launchpads used?
Carl, can you do it real quick?
Yeah, so it's just a MIDI controller. So you can use it anywhere where MIDI is available. So you can use it for a mixer. You can use it for an ATEM. So, yeah.
Excellent. Next question.
Next question in from Chad Lafarge in Columbia, Missouri. Are there any resources to help to train your ears to identify those issues like sample recordings?
Mickey?
Yeah, I'm really a big fan of the more traditional means. One of the more traditional means of learning, wherein one would apprentice under a mentor. That is a great way to learn while at the same time not being fully responsible for a department. So that would be my first suggestion.
Mitch, you got a sentence or two?
Yeah, just you can learn to hear distortion. It's something you have to learn in some cases. And if you teach yourself that valuable tool, then you'll hear it. Of course, you'll never be the same again. But it's a learned thing that you have to go for. And sometimes frequency response is like that too. You have to learn to hear it.
Courtney Gooden.
And if you are going to listen to sample recordings, make sure you're playing them back on a faithful reproducer, because those samples, you may not be able to hear the defaults in those sample recordings if what you're playing it back on masks those sample recordings. If he's talking about sample rate differences, no, you can't hear the difference between 44.1 and 48.
Amen to that. I will say there used to be ear training records out there, even back in the LP vinyl days, that would tell you what like 60 cycle hum sounds like. But I don't, probably online. So do some searching. Let's go to the next question.
Tom Ferguson, Phoenix, Arizona, and right here on the panel. Where would a sweep generator be helpful for audio testing?
Carl, quick.
Well, so as Courtney said before, hearing tests, that's one. Feedback tests, especially in older venues, that's really good too. Another one is also your recording pipeline to find out if you have any dips or peaks in there. And so you can do a test through there. It'll actually tell you right at the other end of your chain what's going on.
And Mitchell, real quick.
Quickly, frequency response.
John Petto, real quick.
I was an intern at an audio repair shop, but we used sweep to test speakers. When I repaired speakers, we would do a sweep test on them.
Courtney, thought, real quick.
Yeah, and if you're into vintage equipment, any analog equipment, you want to use video, sweep generator to check the frequency response of analog equipment and aligning tape heads. It is used for setting the azimuth on tape heads, because the high frequency is the first to go, and you'll see an actual drop in the output if you're monitoring the playback. So when you can align heads, a sweep generator is essential. If with vintage gear, digital gear, not so important.
All right. We got, I think, 3 more questions, or 2 or 3. So we're going to try to do them really quick. We're going to run a little bit over for the back end folks, just a bit. So go ahead. Next question.
Paul Shadwell, Turbenthal, Switzerland. How many panelists suffer with tinnitus, and how do you deal with it?
And Mitchell.
I think as long as I can't properly pronounce the word tinnitus, I don't suffer from it.
Courtney.
You learn to ignore it and you can tune it out. Unfortunately, brought it back up again.
I suffered from it for a little bit. It turned out that I actually went to a neurologist, and it turned out to be a little acoustic neuroma, and I had to have treatment for that. It eventually went away. I am incredibly blessed that it went away, because while I had suffered with that, it was incredibly annoying. So I'm thankful to be rid of that problem. Let's go on to the next question.
And it's for me. I'm asking, what is center channel buildup, and how do you deal with it?
Carl?
So essentially, if you say you're on a stage and you've got 2 mono speakers either side of the stage, in the center of those 2 mono speakers, they're going to be in phase. Well, there's going to be part of it where it's going to be in phase, and that essentially you're going to get a doubling. So, so something that's, it's just going to go up by, essentially 6 dB. If you're anywhere else in the room, it won't be in phase the same way. So you don't get this kind of what's called a center channel, or the bass alley down the center of concerts. So you do get this problem. You do have to tune it. Sometimes this is the reason why the stage projects out. So they have like a runway out of the stage going down that bass alley. So there's no actual audience there. So that's where the artist will go down the center of the stage, wave to the crowd, and then come back up. So they kind of fix that problem by doing these kind of stages and catwalks out of stage to fix the bass alley that's really close to the stage anyway.
And our final question.
And final question in from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, PA. What would be the audio equivalent to the Swiss Army knife that is the Decimator in the video world?
And nobody's went in on this. So I think maybe the answer to this is audio is so complex, there is no one tool that does everything. Oh, wait, maybe I'm wrong. Carl and Courtney are going to very quickly. Oh, Carl's going to give us a very quick answer.
So this is something David Brady brought up before a couple of weeks ago. So essentially there's the Behringer SRC. So this is a sample rate converter. So this is like a decimator. It's essentially like a Teranex is another way of saying it. It's an audio Teranex. It'll take any analog format and convert it to any digital format, and any digital format convert it to any analog format. It will take any digital format, convert it to any other digital format, and so you know where I'm going with this. And you can actually do bidirectional. So you can take an analog format and go to digital, and digital format go to analog, as long as the sample rate in the digital realm is the same. So,
and Mickey, can you do something real quick so we're not too far running over?
Yeah, a spool of cable, a bag of connectors, and a soldering iron.
There you go. And Courtney, do you have one last little quick thought?
Yeah, a matchbox that will match low impedance to high impedance, and high impedance to low impedance is a very handy tool to have.
All right. Well, we've done a remarkable job today, and I want to incredibly thank the panel for their decades of experience. I think I hope that we were incredibly useful to those of you who are watching or listening today. I know I had a great time listening to so many professionals help out with these kind of problems. Remember, after hours, right after this, also remember to watch the credits so you can see all the people in the back end who are helping with this. And we will be back tomorrow doing the same thing. I think, what are we doing tomorrow? We're doing something really interesting. I remember seeing it. Oh, we're breaking down the Queen's Jubilee video celebration. So that should be an interesting day. We'll see you tomorrow on Office Hours. Thanks for watching and listening, or both.
Here, here.
Now we're afraid to either talk or whisper. We're not sure which to do. Let's whisper.
What's that ringing?
Paralysis by analysis. We don't know where to go, so we go nowhere. Those of you that can't hear this, please have your hearing checked. but that's self-defeating. Thank you all for sticking around and helping me get through that last hour. Great job. Almost 100,000 miles in the clock traversal today.